So, does this mic work? Yes, you hear me? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this exclusive press summit or press conference. Let me introduce myself. I'm Eric Jonnaert, Secretary General of ACEA, the European Automotive Industry Association. And I'm accompanied here today with the distinguished members of our Commercial Vehicles Board. This is a very special day for us, talking to you, the media, and other distinguished guests here at Hanover. Why? You know that at this very day, a climate change conference starts in New York, trying to tackle the big issues on climate change. At that same time, we as global commercial vehicle manufacturers come to you to present our point of view in order to contribute to the debate on CO2, on climate change in a very constructive way. So I'm really glad you found the time to be with us, and I'm of course glad that most of the CEOs of Europe's leading commercial vehicle manufacturers could make it as well. This room may very well be today the most exclusive truck stop in Europe. Unfortunately, a few members of our board are not with us, and I want to apologize them. Olaf Persson, President and CEO of Volvo, and Eckhard Scholz, spokesperson of the Board of Management of Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles. They send their regards, and I can tell you that everybody in the Commercial Vehicles Board of ACEA is supporting the statements which will be presented to you today. Speaking of the other colleagues, let me present them to you. First of all, my right-hand side, Maarten Lundstedt, President and CEO of Scania Group. On my left side, Pierre Lahut, Brand President of Iveco. On the other side, in the middle, Wolfgang Bernhard, Chairman of our Commercial Vehicles Board of ACEA and CEO of Daimler Trucks and Buses, accompanied on his left side by Anders Nielsen, CEO of MAN Truck and Bus, and on his right side by Harry Schippers, President of DAF. Without further ado, let me now hand over to Dr. Bernhard.
Thank you, Eric, for your kind introduction, and good afternoon to all of you. Speaking of my colleagues, and in behalf of my colleagues, the CEOs of ACEA Commercial Vehicle Manufacturers, we appreciate this opportunity to meet with you here at the world's top truck show. This show is all about the future of commercial vehicles, so there's no better place to present our vision of future transportation. Today we will address one of the industry's toughest challenges, the reduction of CO2 emissions. All of the European commercial vehicles manufacturers have been discussing this topic over the past months, and we've been working hard to find a joint answer to the question, how are we going to tackle this challenge? And we are glad that today we speak with one voice. Firstly, we will briefly discuss what we have already achieved in this respect. Second, we will cover our industry's recommendation moving forward. And finally, we will lay out our conclusions. So let's start with what we have achieved. To that end, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to put our industry in a larger context. There's no doubt efficient transport is the backbone of Europe's growth and competitiveness. It acts as a link between all other commercial sectors. You can order books, clothes, or even food online, but someone has to deliver these goods. The same goes for the entire manufacturing and production sector, along with all of their jobs. Their work and their ability to compete is totally dependent on a competitive transportation system. The numbers back that up, and very impressively, in 2010, the European transport sector accounted for 548 billion euros in gross value and 4.9% of total value added. This shows its strategic importance for the entire economy, even more so as the transport industry also delivers 10.6 million jobs. To make a long story short, Europe literally would not work without trucks. There would be no food, there would be no goods, and there would be no jobs. So the truck industry does create a large share of Europe's wealth and prosperity, and at the same point of time, it creates only a small share of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions. All heavy-duty vehicles in Europe combined account for 5% of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions. Still, we know there's work to do, and the European truck industry will not shy away from its responsibilities. We have been part of the solution in the past. We have reduced the fuel consumption per ton kilometer of today's heavy-duty trucks by at least 60% since 1965. And we managed to do so despite conflicting emissions regulations, a total of 6 standards within the past 20 years. This improvement was largely driven by market forces alone. Why is that? Well, fuel accounts for over one-third of the total operating cost of a truck, and our customers have to earn money with their trucks. That's why we have reduced fuel consumption through a large numbers of advances in technology. In turn, our customers, they did the math and they bought the most efficient trucks. In the end, it's all about competitiveness. What's not competitive in the market will fail, and in that sense, we have to think about the CO2 targets proposed by the EU regulators. Now, these targets in the world, they are very ambitious. The proposed energy and climate package puts forward a 30% reduction by 2030 compared to 2005. The white paper on transport policy recommends a 60% cut by 2050 compared to 1990. To make it clear, this is more than just a stretched goal. Since the Iron Curtain fell, we have enjoyed a significant economic growth in the European environment, primarily driven by the rebuilding of Eastern Europe. Normally, this would have been accompanied by an overproportional increase of both transportation and CO2 emissions. In reality, we overcompensated for growth rates of transportation emissions with massive investments in fuel-saving technologies. That shows once again we are determined to serve our economy with a minimum impact on our environment. Now, as we look for new measures to reduce CO2, we have to take cost into account. To be more precise, we should first choose those measures where the cost impact on society is the lowest. But the reality is the expensive measures are on the table, such as hybrid drivetrains, exhaust heat recovery systems, and lightweight constructions. If we are forced to put these new technologies into our new vehicles, this would equate to more than 300 euros of abatement cost per ton of CO2. However, 1 ton of CO2 is currently traded at 6 euro on the emission trading system. So the new technologies would cost our society about 50 times more. You don't have to be a finance expert to know that just doesn't make sense. Jumping to costly measures first is not the right decision for our society, because those added costs are not simply somehow absorbed by the transport industry. They will be ultimately passed on to the end consumer. Again, that makes our economy less competitive. Therefore, we need to find new solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That takes me to our second chapter. The recommendations our industry has developed. They are at the very heart of our announcement today. We are convinced they will lead us in the right direction. Our first call for action is to take the full complexity of the truck market into account. Our second call for action is improve customer information and thus strengthen market forces. And most importantly, our third call for action. All relevant stakeholders should be mobilized to work on a fully integrated approach to reduce CO2 in the European transport industry. Now let's get into the details, and with that I turn the floor to Martin.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard. Wolfgang. Bernhard. When you're in Germany, you know, you're more used to say the surname, but we are actually Martin and Wolfgang. Thank you, Wolfgang. And I think, as you said, our first recommendation to policymakers is take full account of the complexity of our market. And I think that has brought the success that the Western European brands have conquered the world. Trucks are, as a matter of fact, totally different from passenger cars. They are not just big cars. They have an extremely modularized approach. In fact, commercial vehicles are like snowflakes. No one truck is exactly like another. They are optimized for their specific application. A large majority of our vehicles are custom built to meet specific and unique customer requirements. That includes just about everything, from the number of axles to the size of the engine, fuel tank, to the size of the cab. Optimization of powertrain and fuel types, the length of the frame rails are often specified down to the last single millimeter. Furthermore, when we take the complete vehicle into account, the tractor plus the trailer, or the rigid plus the trailer, the heavy-duty vehicle market becomes even more complex. There are thousands of shapes and sizes of trucks and buses. To a large extent, the truck market is a market for custom vehicles. It is tailor-made solutions. And that is how you have to think about it to succeed in the long run. Now, Harry, I will give the floor to you and give the details on our second recommendation.
Thank you, Martin. Our second call is to improve customer information. We're convinced if you give the customers full transparency on fuel consumption, then the most efficient products will be the most successful ones. By developing the Vecto computer simulation tool based on real-world data, the European Commission has already laid a solid foundation to do just that. This system can calculate the specific emissions data for each individual truck or bus configuration, so customers can compare and choose the most fuel-efficient vehicle combination adapted to their specific needs. We fully support the Commission in its efforts in this direction. Ultimately, Vecto will cover all segments of transportation. The initial phase focuses on long-haul, regional delivery and coaches, as these three segments account for about 60% of all CO2 emissions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pierre. He'll talk about our third call.
Thanks, Harry. Our third and most important call is to act in concert. All relevant stakeholders in our industry should be mobilized to work on a fully integrated approach to CO2 reduction.
Trucks is only part of a system. Again, I want to emphasize, European truck manufacturers will continue to do their part, and we have the track record to prove it. Back in 2008, right here in Hanover, our industry announced its Vision 2020. The take-home message was, we will reduce fuel consumption of new vehicles by 20% in the period from 2005 to 2020. This translates into an annual reduction rate of 1.3%. Well, I can confirm today that we will achieve these savings. And it's not us predicting that. These are the result of a recent study done by the Independent Research Institute, Transport and Mobility Leuven, or TML. To go beyond that, as proposed by the European Commission, we have to look at the big picture. And the technology of new vehicles is just one part of our vision to reduce CO2 emission on a large scale. There is much more than the vehicle alone that determines CO2 emissions. Trailer design, alternative fuels, transport operation and infrastructure also play a decisive role. In other words, if we really want to move the needle, we have to do more than just squeeze the last percent out of the tractor. We have to join forces with all stakeholders. Only then we will unlock our full potential to reduce CO2 emissions on European streets. Anders, can you give us some insight on the improvements we are expecting from an integrated approach?
Of course, Pierre. Let's see if I get the microphone or if it's working.
It is working.
It's working? Okay, good.
Okay.
Give that back. So let me put some meat on the bones with the following data, again provided from the research institute TML. If we apply all levers, the trailer as well as fuels, operations and infrastructure, we couldn't achieve a further CO2 reduction of 6% for vehicle-related measures for the full fleet, 2.5% with alternative fuels, and 13% for operations. In total, provided that all stakeholders join forces, we could reduce CO2 emissions of the road transport sector by more than 20% over the next 6 years. This means an annual reduction rate of 3.5%. To make it clear, if we move from a new vehicle-only approach, such as the Vision 2020, to a fully integrated approach, we could more than double the annual CO2 reduction rate of our industry. We'd go from 1.3% to an average of 3.5%. I don't have to tell you, that is really a dramatic boost. Let's have a closer look to all the measures, starting with trailers. So Martin, please.
Thank you, Anders. And I would like to talk on the example of weight and dimensions. Revising them has, as you all know, a great potential, and we know what we are talking about. Europe is still discussing piloting the European modular system, EMS, right now. And I think Europe is free to do so, but there is already one pilot up and running in Sweden for over 50 years. And it started with the forestry industry. We replaced 3 trucks with 2, and we are still getting a reduction in fuel consumption of 15 to 25% depending on the application. And we can assure you, we have that experience from Sweden and the Nordic countries. Over this period, we have had no whatsoever additional related safety issue. And there was no harm done to infrastructure either. So Harry, I think it's your turn for another example.
Thanks, Martin. Our next topic, tires, specifically their rolling resistance. Tire rolling resistance is one of the major power consumers on a truck. It accounts for about 20% of its energy consumption. It's not hard to see that one big improvement in CO2 emissions can come from low resistance tires. They can deliver up to 4% reduction by 2020. To get there, we have to lower the rolling resistance by around 10%. We're confident it can be done. After all, over the past 10 years, we've already reduced this factor by 20%. Now Pierre will talk about another important lever to save CO2, renewable fuels.
Thank you, Harry. As you said, renewable fuels can largely contribute to reducing CO2 emissions. Look at our well-to-wheel analysis. Second generation biodiesel, for example, is twice as efficient as common diesel. Still, the penetration rate in Europe is currently close to 0 due to high production costs and lack of infrastructure. Same issue with gas. So, what we need now are the right incentive to ensure the widespread distribution of these fuels. Next on our list, operations. Anders will give you more details on driver training, but first let me quickly explain the benefits of faster fleet renewal and improved infrastructure. The benefit of faster fleet renewal can be summed up in 3 sentences. The average renewal rate in Europe is about 5%. That means we don't get the full effect of today's efficient technology for nearly 15 years. Double this rate and you reduce CO2 emission by around 2%. Regarding infrastructure, the story is as simple. The cleanest truck will not help the environment if it's stuck in traffic. 1 stop per kilometer increases fuel consumption by 50%. On top of that, congestion also harms our economy. About 1% of Europe's GDP is wasted due to traffic jams. So measures like traffic control system would help in both respects. With that, I hand it over to Anders.
Thank you, Pierre. So as the title of the slide says, well-trained drivers are efficient drivers. It's not just a nice advertising slogan from some driver training institute. This is a fact. We have been addressing this over a number of years, A study shows that the different driving styles lead to different fuel consumption. This difference can amount up to as much as 20% difference. With virtual driver training, you can start heading in the right direction. The figure shows the difference in fuel consumption before and after training is an average of 6%. We are convinced better personal or virtual driver training can result in long-term fuel savings from up to 5 to 8%. That is what I would call a low-hanging fruit. So back to you now, Wolfgang, to summarize the integrated approach.
Yes, thank you, Anders. I appreciate, ladies and gentlemen, as these examples have shown, even small measures can have a big influence on CO2 emission reduction. But if we combine all these things together, what would happen then? That's what we did in kind of a pilot lab. For 5 years, we've been running a fleet of up to 25 vehicles from Sweden to Holland, and we implemented the measures we just mentioned and more. Optimized aerodynamics for the complete vehicle combination, maintenance programs ensuring the tractor and the trailer are always aligned, tires are filled at the right pressure, etc. Telematics in order to find the deviation in the vehicle or driver performance, and regular driver trainings and coaching. Enhanced logistic planning and fill rates. And finally, we also used vehicle-to-vehicle combination on communication for platooning. That means many vehicles were traveling together in a road train formation, actively coordinated by a lead vehicle and information technology. The results were impressive. By combining all these measures, we could reduce fuel consumption of our test fleet by a full 50% between 2008 and 2013. So our reality check underscores that an integrated approach is not just a far-out vision, it could be reality very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues and I certainly could go on for hours about many more examples, but we're looking forward to discussing our visions with you, so let me now get to our conclusions. Driving down fuel consumption and therefore emissions is a crucial issue to the commercial vehicle industry. We assure you that we will do our part. Since the truck industry alone cannot address all of the emission-related concerns. So our key recommendation to achieve the climate goals of the European Commission is striving for are take into account the full complexity of the heavy-duty vehicle market. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Improve customer information to strengthen market forces. Our customers will be the best fuel regulators for fuel efficiency. And finally, support our idea of a fully integrated approach in order to double the annual reduction rate of CO2. We are convinced this is the right approach and the only way to reduce CO2 emissions of the transport industry in Europe on a large scale. When all the stakeholders of the industry join forces, we will help our customers, we will help our economy, and we also help our environment. And Europe could write the blueprint for other markets as well again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you to the other members of the board for their presentation. This ends the formal part. Now we start with the Q&A session. Can I remind you this is an industry association conference, so no company-specific questions, please. You can, of course, ask those questions outside this room. There's going to be plenty of opportunity the rest of the week for asking company-specific questions. So let's focus the Q&As on what was just presented to you. If you want to ask a question, please present yourself and specify to whom you want to ask the question. So we'll start over there.
Wilshire's Commercial Motor Magazine. What about the longer dimensions that have been proposed, the extra 50 centimetres at the front of the cab? What's that going to do for fuel efficiency, and is it a good thing as far as you're concerned?
Might we want to kick it off? Wolfgang?
Well, it started out as a as a proposal to improve fuel efficiency. After long discussions, we find out the contribution to fuel efficiency are fairly low. And now we're talking the lengthening of the cab as a safety and comfort related measure. So by the end of the day, this has nothing to do with fuel efficiency, or to a lesser extent, it's more about conceived safety and comfort. We are still discussing the effects of this measure, whether this is the most cost efficient and best way to do it. With the Commission, we haven't come to a conclusion yet, but this is work in progress. We believe if you want to really move the needle, it's not about lengthening the cabin. This is what Martin said, is about lengthening the trailer. So we would love to see 25-meter trucks, because with that you can easily get fuel reduction rates of 20%, 15 to 25%, as Martin said. Less trucks on the road. For 3 normal trucks, only 2 long trucks. Less wear on infrastructure, and less traffic congestion as well. So a lot of advantages, can be implemented very fast. And as Martin said, pilot is running for the last 50 years in Scandinavia.
Okay. Next question. Yeah, back.
Enrico Griffini, Via Trasporti, Italy. How do you see the role of LNG in reducing CO2 emissions?
Okay, Pierre.
There is a definitive advantage to LNG, because, as we know, 10% lesser emissions. But on top of that, especially for urban area, we eliminate totally the PMs. So LNG is definitely on its way. There are some projects in the European Union. We see that other continents or major economic powers such as US or China are a long way ahead, despite our original technological age in Europe. And we can only encourage, and it's one of the examples of system approach, the European Commission to drive further this infrastructure development. The role can be key, both for emissions and for competitiveness.
And I think also when it comes to the infrastructure development with LNG or CNG, that is also paving the way for biogas. That is of course much better, but I mean, then you have the infrastructure in place.
Okay. Next question, please, over there.
Good events, truck and business Belgium. When talking about weights and dimensions, you mentioned the EMS for longer trailers. But a few years ago, we were also talking about making the trailers themselves longer through the aid of aerodynamic flaps or whatever. Is this still something you recommend?
If I just can start there, Wolfgang, I think that whatever measure we can do to have some flexibility when it comes, for example, to the end of the trailer, we see that it's giving a contribution of a couple of percent, and why shouldn't we do it? I mean, we are talking about the 30-40 centimeters, and that is of course having no whatsoever effect on road safety or other issues. It's just contributing, and I think what is the core message of this press conference, as also Wolfgang said at the end of the press conference, is that all these measures can be combined, and then we are achieving great results.
Anders, you want to add?
No, we're just going in the same direction. I mean, if you have it's a good opportunity, but you also, when we're talking about the length of the vehicles, going back to what you said, Wolfgang, if you can use it for payload, then CO2 per ton kilometer is also affected in a very positive way. So it's all about how do you use the length or the flexibility in length. Aerodynamics, absolutely, but this is to increase the payload. I think that is the most efficient possibility.
Okay. Other question? Please, here in the middle.
André Kranke from the German magazine Verkehrsumschau. What kind of regulations do you need, and which one you don't need?
To start, we definitely don't need regulations that is not working in the direction of how do you actually measure efficiency. And simply speaking, if we are starting to get regulations that is not measuring, for example, CO2 per transported ton kilometer or transported passenger kilometers, we will have a big problem, because our way of solving complexity, as we discussed, by applications, by segments, that has led, I think, all of those companies standing on stage to have a world-leading, one of the few industries coming from Europe that has a clear world-leading position, and therefore all regulations must really go for efficiency where it makes sense, and that is per transported ton kilometer, for example.
If I may add to this, clearly, our sector is probably one of the most regulated sectors in the world, not only at EU level, because we have also UNEC standards to comply with. And so, obviously, we want to take advantage of the arrival of a new European Commission who has an agenda for growth and competitiveness to engage also constructively in a discussion on how to ensure we can rather, focus in first instance on implementing what's in the books before we start, with new regulation. There's a tendency to kind of inflate regulations in Europe. I think Europe is excellent in exporting regulations. I think we want to be excellent in continuing exporting trucks and buses.
It's always a risk that you have with extended regulations, that you create a sub-optimized solution. What is driving our day-to-day competition between us is that we try every day to become more efficient than the other one. And efficiency for our customers is really fuel consumption equals CO2. So we have a very natural driving force. Our customer is really, perhaps a difference from the Euro 4, 5, 6 discussions. CO2 is really what the customer are asking for us. So here we have a completely natural driving force driving us to reduce CO2. And if you create too many regulations specifying exactly how that should be done, the risk is that you create a sub-optimized solution for the market.
On top of it, regulations that we need is regulation that involves all other stakeholders, the operators, infrastructure, the mineral oil industry that have to come up with new improved fuels. So we need also other stakeholders to engage in that venture in order to reduce CO2. The truck industry and the vehicle alone will not be able to make it. So we are here today to complete and to draw and to make the picture complete, and to make sure that everybody who can contribute also contributes in a way so by the end of the day we are still having a competitive transportation industry in Europe that also is good with respect to what happens outside of Europe.
Other question? Please, over here.
Hello, Richard Simpson from Trucking Topics in the UK. Quick question for you, being the devil's advocate here. If we were to say the measures you propose basically involve letting trucks that are very much similar to the trucks of today carry more goods, are not the green politicians going to turn around and say, actually, we don't want this because you will take traffic off less damaging modes of transport, such as the railways and the waterways, and move them onto our congested and polluted roads? We should actually make you go the expensive route with hybrid drives and so on, and not allow you to simply pile more onto existing vehicles, which is what you're proposing. How do you counter that argument?
Okay. Wolfgang? We have right now pilots running in Germany to find out whether those long trucks substitute railway transportation. We have hundreds of those trucks running right now in Germany, and the intermediate report that has just come out a couple of weeks ago just shows there are no traffic incidents whatsoever, so Martin already addressed the safety issue. Second, because those trucks have the same weight regulations as a normal truck, 40 tons. There's no more wear on the infrastructure. And third, there is no substitution on railway. So none of the transportation done on railway is now going onto the street. As in contrary, 3 trucks are replaced by 2 trucks. thereby reducing congestion and thereby reducing the wear on the infrastructure. So it's all in all is a very good solution. I believe that at some point of time the Greens will also come to see that. We had a first discussion in Brussels with some of the Green gentlemen, and they say, we think we have to change our position here. We very much welcome that.
Harry, you want to add to?
No, I think it's key to emphasize that, and I think Wolfgang made that point very clear, that if you look at all the investments we have to do in the truck industry, we are talking about 300 euros per ton of CO2 compared to, what was it, 6 euros on the free market. So we need to make sure that there's a balance between the investments and the technology that we have to provide as an industry, and the best judge of that are our customers. So they will determine if the price increase of the truck is enough or reasonable for the incremental fuel consumption improvement it brings.
And one additional point there, I think it's also important that we confirm the need of all modalities in transport. We are not saying that we should only go by road transport, not at all. I think there's a perfect need for sea transport, air transport, train transport. But to have an efficient logistics in Europe, to make us competitive in the world market, we are depending on road transports, and that we will be also in the next coming years. So it's all about making those transports as efficient and as sustainable as possible.
Maybe to add also, we are also active in the people mobility. As you know, it's not only about trucks, and we know how virtuous we can be in this field, because if you look at what's happening in the bus world, we are far ahead. And this bus world, actually, we see that the conflict between road and train or railway has evaporated, because today we are confronted, or public spending is confronted to a sustainability crisis, which you need to be sustainable for the CO2, but you need to be sustainable for the money. And this is something which is no longer an issue to oppose one with the other. As we just rightly said, it's a matter of system, and it goes back to the point to approach it as such, as a system.
Okay. Other question? Yes. On that side again.
Yes, Claude Evans from Truck and Business again. Reducing the death toll is the other big priority of the Commission. We've talked a lot about CO2, and you've said that the longer cabs would be only good for safety and comfort reasons. Now, if you don't get those longer cabs, does that mean that you rely totally on current or future technology, safety systems, to reduce death tolls without larger crumple zones, for example? Can you be instrumental in decreasing the death toll on Europe's roads without longer cabs and with active safety systems?
Well, active safety is the name of the game for safety for trucks. We have to make sure that none of these accidents happen. Crumple zones are only there to make sure that once it happens, the implications are as small as possible. A truck going with 80 kilometers with 40 ton down the road is equivalent to a passenger car going 400 kilometers an hour. You cannot put enough crumple zone in front of a vehicle moving that fast and having that kind of kinetic energy. So our primary drive, and that's I think true for the whole industry, is getting active safety systems in place, making sure that those accidents do not happen in the first place. And I can assure you this industry had made great advances in this respect. We started out with ABS system, then we moved on to ESP. Now we have lane departure warning systems in place. We move on to active brake assistance systems, and so on and so forth, and there will be more to come. So preventing accidents from happening is the name of the game for the truck industry.
And Wolfgang, if I may add, we talked about CO2 reduction and the importance of fleet renewal. And I think if we talk about safe trucks, also there it's important to focus on fleet renewal. The newest trucks that are produced today and tomorrow will have all the technology, lane departure warning, advanced emergency braking, stability control, and so forth. But there's a lot of older trucks still driving around. And I think there needs to be legislation that also focuses on the usage of older trucks.
Other question? Yes, there in the back.
Steve Banner, Transport News Scotland. As I know you gentlemen would be aware, the UK, of which Scotland is part, is somewhat unusual in having no height limit on trailers, as a consequence of which the UK has developed quite a major market in big capacity tall double-deck trailers, which have an enormous value in bringing down CO2 output. My question to you is this: given that that is the case, would you be willing to lobby for a complete abolition of all height limits on trailers throughout Europe, so that the trailers developed in the UK can be used all over Europe where possible and practical?
Okay, thank you for the question from Scotland.
If I start answering, I think what's driving the height limitations is, of course, the infrastructure and the height of the bridges and the reliability to know if I'm driving within the regulations, I can actually pass under the bridges on the highways and so on. And to abolish all height regulations, I would say that would bring a lot of problems into which roads can you actually choose. The height regulation, in my opinion, is less important than the length regulations. Length regulations will not affect or drive infrastructure investment in the same way that the abolishment of height regulations would do.
Okay. Anybody else want to step in there? No? Okay. Other question? No? Well, that concludes then the press conference of today. Thank you for your participation and your attention. So you find more information in the press pack, which you could pick up at the start of the event. Have a good afternoon.